Good evening, everyone. This is Rabbi Noah Farkas with Valley Beth Shalom. Very happy to be here tonight and to have everyone join us on Zoom. And just going to just welcome everyone who's back with us. I hope everyone had a lovely Memorial Day. We had a wonderful ceremony at VBS, remembering those who veterans who were very special to us and who not only served our country, but paid the ultimate price to hold back the forces of evil in order for us to live the lives that we live. So just want to give a shout out and memory to all of those who served and who passed, but also a thank you to all those who served and are still serving today on ships and bases across the world. Tonight, we're going to learn Pirke Avot again. And just as a refresh, we've been learning one text a week, or one Mishnah a week. So we have a whole year ahead of us of learning maybe. And just to reset the context, the Pirke Avot is a major book of Jewish ethics. In some ways, it is the manual of how to be a Jew from ancient times. It's just a really powerful thing. So, and those ethics, as ancient as they are as relevant today as I think ever. And so we're going to look tonight at our next Mishnah. I want to welcome especially my students online, both here in the Zoom and online on Facebook and YouTube. All right, folks, buckle up. I'm going to share the screen and we're going to get started. Okay. So hopefully everyone can see that. I'm going to try to center it there. Okay. So every week we've been learning one Mishnah, and every Mishnah is small and tight, and it's almost like a Zen koan, but is so deep. And the first several series of Mishnayot from Pirke Avot all are based on a chain of transmission. One goes to the next, that goes to the next, that goes to the next, to demonstrate the history of Torah and where it comes from, both in terms of the written Torah, like the 5 books of Moses, and what we call the oral Torah, which is the book that we understand to be the core essence of Jewish life. And that gets written down in the Mishnah, in the Midrash, in the Talmud, and in the codes and other places. That's what really formed the texture of what makes Jewish life and not just biblical life. And so just to review, each one of these generations of teachers learned something from the person before, and they were setting out axioms or maxims for how to live life and how to build a world. And so we come to the fourth one, which is found in the book of Pirke Avot. And we have a statement. It says, Yossi ben Yoetzer ish Tzerida omer, Yehe betecha beit va'od lechachamim. V'have mitapek ba'afer raglehem, v'have shoteh b'tzameh et divrehem. Yossi ben Yoetzer of Tzerida said, and he learned this from our Antigonus of Socho, who was the one from the previous Mishnah, he says, make your house a meeting house for the sages, and get sooty, literally get down in the dirt, in the dust of their feet, and drink with thirst their words. That's it. That's all we're going to learn tonight. We can actually end right there. Make sure everyone understands that they should come over and bask in the dirt of my feet, and we are good to go. So what's he really saying, though? Here he's trying, remember, this is actually a guide not just for the layperson, but it's a guide for the leaders themselves, which I can't underscore that enough, that this book, Pirke Avot, is not meant necessarily when you're writing, you have to choose who is your audience. The audience wasn't supposed to be the average layperson learning Mishnah on a Tuesday night. This was the book of leadership development for the rabbis themselves. So for this man, Yossi ben Yoetzer, this teacher, to tell his students who are going to be leaders of the community that their houses should be open to scholars, and then they should literally go and sit in the dust of the scholars' feet and drink with thirst their words. Of course, meaning is that to be very open-minded and to make your house that which involves learning. that learning itself is a value. So I just want to put this out here. This is one of the most unique aspects of the Jewish soul. Other cultures, and I don't mean this in a judgmental way, so please don't take it, but other cultures have valued in various parts of the world valor or courage. Other cultures have valued strength and fortitude, wealth and power. Other cultures have valued all sorts of different types of ways of being a human being. The Jewish way of being a human being is to be a learner and a teacher. And that what we value more than anything else are students and teachers, and the relationships between a teacher who has mastered material and the student who is learning material. And it's shocking when you think about it, that our forefathers, our foremothers, ancestors upon ancestors ago, valued learning more than commerce. They valued learning more than trades. They valued learning more than politics. They valued learning more than land owning or having political rights to land. Although all of those things are necessary for making life. What they valued, though, was the learning of Torah and the teaching of Torah. And as you saw that before in several other Mishnayot coming earlier, we saw that the world stands on three things: on Torah, on the teaching of Torah, on Avodah, on temple worship, and Gimilu Chasadim. And that we saw through that learning Torah was meant to, it could have, one way of looking at it is that each one leads to the next. And so Torah itself is the source, right? In other versions, we saw in the very first Mishnah, it says, be discerning in judgment and rear many students. It didn't say have a lot of people in your pyramid scheme for selling, conditioner or nail products, right? It didn't say bring up many investors in your stock portfolio. It said bring many students. And these were how we built the world. So that is the Jewish, was unique to the Jewish soul. I wouldn't say it's solely unique to us now, but it was a unique part of who we were, and why Talmud Torah and the love of learning is as important as prayer, as important as acts of loving kindness. And so a lot of people out there who don't understand Judaism asks us, what is your faith? Because that's a very, faithful way of believing. If you want to be a Muslim, you have to believe that God is, singular God, and Muhammad is his prophet. If you are a Christian, you have to believe in Jesus as the savior of the world in some version or another, right? To be a Jew is not necessarily to have deep faith, but it is to be a learner and a teacher, which means that we're not just a faithful religion, we're also a culture, we're a way of life. We are not prophets, we are sages, and we rear sages. And that is how we approach the world. And so when Yossi and Yoetzer says, make your house a meeting house for the sages, and get sooty in the dust of their feet, and drink wine with thirst from their words, it's because we should understand that Talmud Torah, the love of learning itself, is a devotional act. And you cannot learn something only for the sake of knowing it yourself. You have to learn it in order to teach it. So let's go through a few texts that pull on these ideas, including some of the challenges, and talk about them. So the first comes from Talmud. And it says, what is the recipe for a community? What are the requirements to have a community? If you were building your own city for the first time, you might think that the first thing you need is to build a city wall, or you need a cistern for water, or you need to make sure you raise an army, or that you need some way of paying taxes, so you have to raise revenue. That's not at all what in the Talmud they understand for what is the basic of a city. It says, and it was taught, a city doesn't have these 10 things, it's not appropriate for a sage to live within it. A court that metes out punishments, a charity fund collected by the 2 and distributed by 3, which is a whole system, a synagogue, a bathhouse, a restroom, a doctor, a bookkeeper, a notary, a butcher, and a teacher of children. So let's take these one at a time, okay? So in order for you to have full sort of participation in the community, to have a sage live with you, You need a court that metes out punishment. Why? Because you need to have a system of justice that isn't just about blood feuds and avarice and hubris. You need a court system that understands a greater idea of justice. At the same time that you have this strict idea of justice, you also need to have a wonderful overflowing idea of charity. And when it says by collected by two and distributed by three, those were actually anti-fraud measures that they brought in. So two would collect, so they would bear witness to each other to make sure that neither of them were collected, and distributed by three, so that no one individual could have control over the entire pot. It was meant, it's oversight, basically. You needed a place to pray. You needed a place to get washed up, to use the bathroom. You needed a doctor for circumcision, because at that time, thousands of years ago, doctors were not doctors like we have today. Thank God we have doctors today. They didn't had much to do. Doctors didn't have much to do. So when they talk about doctors, they really mean someone who can cut and be a moil and be a circumcision. You need a bookkeeper, a notary for writing scrolls, right? So you need a scribe, and you need somebody who can seal things for court documents. You need a butcher for meat, and you, of course, need a teacher of children. You can't have the most important rabbi living in your city unless you have the kindergarten teacher also living in your city, which I think is a beautiful measure, that in order to have the sage, the people who are the target audience of Pirke Avot, the up and coming sages, you have to have a teacher of children. And then in the name of Rabbi Akiva, they said even types of fruit, because there are types of fruit that help eyesight. So this was the interesting thing. I have no idea exactly what that means. All I can tell you is that when I was buying books as a rabbinical student, they asked me if I cared more about my eyes or my back. And I said, what do you mean? He says, as a young man, you probably care more about your back. So we'll buy smaller versions, smaller print versions of the book. And as an older man, you care more about your eyes. So you're going to need larger version prints of the book. But so at the beginning of your rabbinical school journey, do you care more about your eyes or about your back? So I know what size books to print for you. And I can't help but thinking that Rabbi Akiva, who you'll learn in a minute, was a second career rabbi. Maybe he cared more about his eyes than his back. That's the only thing I can think of is why they cared about eyesight, is because they're trying to rear sages. Okay, so here in Sanhedrin, we're already seeing this idea that in order to have a sage there, you need to have distributions of justice and charity. You need to have good bookkeeping. You need to have the ability for kosher meat for slaughter, and you need to have a teacher of children, which I think itself is just a beautiful thing. What is a community? It is a community that can distribute justice and charity fairly. It is a community that can take care of itself and is clean, and it is a community that rears and teaches children. All very powerful ideas. And again, what's missing from this? Missing an army, you're missing a noble, you're missing a king, you're missing a wall, you're missing any of the things that you might typically think as your important things to secure a piece of land. Because what secures land in our eyes, what secures vision of community in our eyes, is education itself. And we know this because it comes from the Torah. And here, of course, is one of my favorite lines from the Torah. It says, from the book of Deuteronomy, Ki ha-mitzvot hazot asher anochi metzar hayom, lo neflet hi memecha v'lo rocha hi. Surely this instruction which I enjoin upon you this day is not too baffling for you, nor is it beyond your reach. Here, Moses is at his deathbed. I mean, he's coming down, it's chapter 30 out of 50 in the book of Deuteronomy, on the last day of his life, and he is trying to tell people to keep the Torah. So one of the questions that come up is, well, this Torah, this thing that was revealed from heaven, it's too hard. It's too hard to be Jewish. It's too hard to read it. I don't have time. It's too hard to sit and learn it. It's beyond me. And here, Moses is saying, surely it's not, this instruction is not baffling for you. It's not beyond your reach. It's not beyond your reach. It's not in heaven, he says, that you should say, who among us should go up to heavens and get it for us and impart to us and observe it? Neither is it beyond the sea that you should say, who among us can cross to the other side of the sea and get it for us and impart it to us that we may observe it? No, these things are very close to you. They're in your mouth and in your heart to observe it. So, where does Moses situate the Torah? We think in the book of Exodus that it just comes from Mount Sinai, or even the book of Leviticus, it emanates from the tabernacle, right? But here, Moses is saying to this next generation, this generation that was never there at the Exodus for Egypt and was never at Sinai, that the Torah is just not, it's not that complicated. It's not immaculate in the way that you think that it is. It's not over the sea that you have to go reach it for the rest of your life. It's already there. It's already in your mouth and in your heart. And so I want to reflect on you now. If it takes all of these things to Talmud Torah to build a community, and it takes the idea of teaching your children is a commandment that we know, and that the Torah is not supposed to be so difficult, why do we have such a hard time learning? Why is it that every time I run a class, I have people who said, "Oh, I really wish I could be there, but right, the Dodger game is on, the play is going on, TV show I wanted to watch, there's a board meeting tonight," whatever it is that you say, right? Why is it that? And the rabbis, in their sort of playfulness, like to poke fun at themselves and at their students. Because I can tell you, and I think any of you have ever been a teacher before, you can get frustrated at your students. Students aren't paying attention, students aren't showing up, students who didn't sharpen their pencils, students who didn't bring their books, right? You can get frustrated with your students. But they only ask this question: why is the Torah, like, why the Torah? And why is it that people are so resistant to learning the Torah? And you're going to feel in this next series of texts their frustration. And I love it. I just think it's such a playful text. It's totally worth exploring. So in the book of Proverbs, it plays on these two ideas, one from book of Deuteronomy and this idea from the book of Proverbs. So in Proverbs, it says, "A lazy man says there's a cub on the road and a lion in the square, and the door turns on its hinge, and the lazy man is on his bed. The lazy man buries his hand in the bowl, and he will not even bring it to his mouth. And the lazy man thinks himself wiser than 7 men who give good advice." So let's take these one at a time just for a minute before we go into the midrash, right? So in the first one is, the lazy man says, "Oh, there's a lion outside, a cub on the road and a lion in the square," right? They're afraid of something. The door turns on its hinge and the lazy man is in his bed. So what's the image there? That it's a swinging door, okay? It's on its hinge. You ever try to sleep at night and you can't sleep because you hear the dripping of the faucet in the bathroom? Or you hear the wind and the wind is gusting and you hear the of the hinge, right? So what are they saying? They're saying he won't get out of bed to go fix the door and latch the door. It's like, "Oh, I can hear the faucet running in the other bathroom, and I know if I just turn the water off, it will go away, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stay in bed." Right? And so Proverbs, King Shlomo says in this moment, that's kind of lazy, don't you think? Right? And then he goes one further, almost in this Kafka-esque image building here. He says, "The lazy man buries his hand in the bowl and he won't even bring it to his mouth." Imagine that you had a bowl of nuts or a bowl of rice or something and you're hungry and your hand is literally in the bowl and you won't bring the food to your mouth. Right? That seems very, very lazy. And then the last one, which completely changes the metaphor, because the first three were about fear, they're about just exhaustion and feeling comfortable where you are, and then really superlative in this sense that the food is literally right in front of you and you won't eat it, right? Then it says, "The lazy man thinks himself wiser than 7 men who give good advice." Have you ever met someone like this? You ever met somebody who tells you what they think, and even if you didn't ask for it? Or, like, and not that they're necessarily giving you advice, but they're just kind of telling you how you should live, right? And they didn't take the time to ask questions about where you come from, what's your story, who are you related to, what are your struggles, what are you good at, right? You show up and they say, "What's the matter?" And you give them a little sort of, I'm just struggling with my wife right now. We're having kind of a hard time." And then all of a sudden, like, you get one sentence in, and then the next hour they're just giving you advice and talking about their life and what you should be doing or whatever, right? Rabbi Shlomo, King Shlomo, says that that's pretty lazy because they didn't take the time to get to know you, who you are. And so here we have these ideas of laziness, and the rabbis are going to play with these when it comes to the student of what it means to learn Torah. It's one of my favorite midrashim. My wife and I co-teach this together, by the way, this next midrash, often to teachers, because there's a lot to be said about how different learners learn. So the rabbis say, I'm going to skip the Hebrew for the sake of teaching tonight. The rabbis say, Solomon said, which is Mishlei, Shlomo said 7 things about a lazy person, but what Moses said was greater than them all. How so? So again, it's going to use these 2 texts and kind of weave them together. It's why Midrash is high literature. It's not just poems written at the back of a bar somewhere. It's beautifully, highly edited, educative literature. So what does he say? He says, they say to a lazy person, your teacher is in the city, and learn Torah from them. The lazy person's answer is, well, I fear the lion on the road. Where is this from? The lazy person says there's a lion on the road. That's coming from Mishlei 26:13, right? So in the first level, the lazy person, and again, you could take remember that they're playing here. So they're calling this person lazy, but really what he is fearful. There's a clear and present danger outside. And I'm not willing to go outside, even though I should go and learn. As it says in our Mishnah that we learned earlier tonight, it says in our Mishnah that you should make your house open and bring a sage into your house and sit at their feet and learn from them. And now the sages are saying to the student, there, in your city, there's a Torah scholar, go learn. And the lazy person says, I fear the lion on the road. And where is this from? The lazy person says there's a lion on the road. Now, I know that sometimes there's a clear threat, that there are clearly things that have to get done, and that prevents anyone from learning. Fear especially. Fear clouds the mind in such a way that you can't even learn. If you are only thinking about how to make your mortgage payment, it is very hard to open your mind enough to learn Torah. If you are food insecure and you don't know how to feed your family, it's very hard to think about how you're going to learn Torah. If there is an order that tells us to stay home, and the only way you can learn Torah is to leave your home and maybe endanger yourself or even endanger the teacher, it's very hard to make that decision. And they're calling this person lazy, which is their own judgmental way. But again, they're playing here. This is a play. This is a little bit of ironic. So the first level is genuine fear of a clear threat. Okay. And if you notice where the Torah scholar is sitting in the city, which means they're in the environment, right? They're in somewhere here in LA, for example. Okay. And the next one says, they say to the lazy person, hey, your teacher is in the province. Get up and go to them. And the lazy person replies, I fear lest there be a lion in the streets. As it says, a lion in the streets. Again, the same quote. So here, the 2 things happen. The teacher moved. The teacher is no longer just in the city. The teacher is now more or less in your province, although probably the direct translation of this, if you're focusing on the narrative value of it, is like in your neighborhood. So it's not just that the teacher is over, I don't know, in Pico Robertson and we're living here in Encino. The teacher is now in Encino. Go up and go learn to him. So the first thing is that the teacher has come closer to the student, okay? The second answer, though, is, I fear lest there be a lion in the streets. Now, normally, if this was a class and we were all sitting around a table, I'd ask you, what's the difference of the fear in the second student from the first student? The first student, I'll just tell you because this format is not great for a lot of back and forth, but I'll just tell you that the first student has demonstrated that there's a clear threat outside, and he or she has a long way to go. The second student fears that there might be a threat. So, what is the difference between the first student and the second student? Is that the second student is already playing that sort of traumatic, fearful moment in their mind, rehearsing the future in their mind, that they might come upon a lion in the road, and therefore they shouldn't go out. It's kind of like saying, it might rain today, even though the sun is perfectly sunny right now, it's shining. It might rain today. I better take an umbrella with me. And it's July in Southern California. Or it might be something like, I'm afraid of my own feelings. We'll take this a little bit deeper now, okay? How many of us at one point or another have avoided social situations or challenging situations, not because the challenge itself is difficult, but you're afraid you might be embarrassed because they'll know that you don't know anything? How many of you have shown up to a class or not shown up to a class or gone out and because you're afraid that you're going to be embarrassed because of some situation? That situation hasn't actually occurred yet. Whether it's sitting in a class like this one and you're afraid because you've never studied before, or maybe going to a party and you're afraid that someone else might be there, so you're not even going to go, even if you don't know that they're going to be there, because you're afraid of that feeling that you'll get. Having feelings about your feelings is a depressive attitude, and that's the second level. So the first level is a clear and present threat, and the rabbi is far away. The second level is that the rabbi is closer. The rabbi has come in a little bit more. And the student, or the lazy person in this case, has feelings about their feelings. Okay? Let's go to the next level. They say to the lazy person, but your teacher lives next to your house. And the lazy person says, well, there's a lion outside. As it says, the lazy person says, there's a lion outside and in the streets, and I'll be killed. So where is the rabbi in the third level? He's literally, or she is literally next door to the student. And even if there's a lion outside, we're talking the distance of 12 feet from your house to their house. They're saying now that there's a lion outside. There might, even if there are threats outside, you're not willing to take a chance to go next door. Now, I know in this whole pandemic and COVID-19 situation, it's very hard to think about going next door, right? We all have to kind of just go in our own backyards and yell over the fence to each other if we want to have a conversation in person and not on the screen. But again, you see the rabbi here has moved closer and the student has yet to leave their own room. And here the rabbis want to challenge the student to just take even the slightest of risk. And the student's not willing to do that. So they label him or her as a lazy person. So that's the third level. So the first is there's a clear threat that you know you're going to run into. The second is that you don't even know that there's a threat, but you have feelings about it. So you're afraid to go out. The third is that you can't even go next door. Can't even hop off your porch onto the porch next door because you know there might be something threatening out there. And because there's something threatening out there, you're not willing to take that risk. Okay, is everyone with me here? Is everyone on Zoom with me here? Give me like a wave of your hands. Make sure you're with me. Good. Okay. So then they say to the lazy person, the next level, he, or the sage, is in this house. Is in this house itself. It's right here. We are fulfilling that precept. You have made your house a house where a sage can come in. And the lazy person replies, if I go and find the door locked, I'll have to return. Meaning, if I leave my bedroom and I go to the door and the door is locked, I'll have to go back to my bed. So they say to the lazy person, the door is open. Where is this from? It says the door turns on its hinge and the lazy person is on their bed. The opportunity is literally in your house. Now, let's think about the person who says, before we get all the way to the end here, the person who says, if the door is locked, I'll have to return. What if I go and don't find meaning? What if I go and I don't feel welcome? What if I go and listen to an idea that's too challenging or upsetting to me? What if the door is locked? What if the door is locked? That's a real fear. Even if I only have to go 4 feet out of my bed to the door, open the door, what if it's locked? Now, of course, if you take the metaphor to its extremis, you can ask the question, well, you locked the door, you're in your own bedroom. And so what does that mean? If we create these rooms over here, locking our own doors, right? And here, though, the rabbis say, let's open the door. The door is open. And then here it gets to this really kind of absurd vision, right? That a lazy person is sitting on their bed. They hear the door swinging on its hinge and they won't get out of bed. So this feels kind of lazy. Even if the fear, right? Even if the rabbi is in the next room, right? And even if the door is open, the student just says, just not going to get out of bed today. We all have days like that too, by the way. Finally, which is number 6, finally, when the lazy person knows not what further answer to give. Remember, the rabbi is in the province or in the city, in the neighborhood, next door, in the house, right? What else can we do for you? I mean, you can hear sort of in the background, you can hear the frustration building amongst these teachers. Like, I did this for you. We got closer to you. I translated everything for you. I gave you less homework. I gave you the Zoom. I gave you, stuff to pick up, right? I've done everything I think I can do for you. Finally, when the lazy person knows not further answer to give, they say, whether the door is open or the door is closed, I just want to sleep a little longer. As it says, how long will you lie there, lazy bones, when you wake from your sleep? That's a person who just refuses to learn. Person who wants to stay asleep. And of course, this is a metaphor because the lion isn't real and the city and the province isn't real. The house isn't real. The door with the swinging, squeaky hinge isn't real, right? This is someone who just wants to sleep. I like my life. I like not knowing what is expected of me. Because if I knew what was expected of me, I would start thinking of a world different than my own. I don't want to hear about the suffering of other people. Because when I do, I feel like I had a bad day. I don't want to think about a world that's better than the one we live in, because all I want to do is sleep a little longer. This is the epitome of the frustration of a teacher with their student. I don't mean a teenage student who sleeps all morning. I mean about even an adult student who just says, I don't care about the thing you've dedicated your life to. I just want to sleep. And that's where they throw in that little insult at the end, right? For this, they say, how long? There's not even a conversation, right? They just kind of slam the student. How long will you lie there, lazy bones? When the lazy person arises from their sleep in the morning, when they finally wake up and food is placed before them, they are too lazy to put it in their mouth. Where is this from? And the lazy person buried their hand in the dish and will not such as bring it back to their mouth. Now think about that for a minute, right? No, lazy. They're continuing this story, right? This person is so lazy they won't even eat. This plays on Mishle. But think about this: when the rabbi now, let's say, is no longer in the room next door, he's literally sitting at the table with the student. I'm putting the food in front of you, and you won't even bring it to your mouth. So if you've gone through these first six, you can see how the frustration of the teacher, right? I compromise, I compromise, I compromise, I bring this to you, I try to reach you, I try to reach you, and the student just feels recalcitrant, the student feels defiant, the student feels lazy in their minds, right? And the rabbis are, furious, and they're upset, and they're starting to make fun of their own students, and not in a playful kind of way. They're insulting their own students. And I think a lot of teachers, and this is when I teach this to teachers, we let them express their frustrations. We let them express their frustrations that especially public school teachers, they have to buy all their own supplies. And they have all these frustrations that students won't do homework, and that the system doesn't seem to be educating kids properly. And they're frustrated that they dedicated their life to something. The teaching is a calling for many, many, many teachers, and the student doesn't want to learn. And so they're very frustrated. And then the rabbis ask, what is the seventh thing? What's the seventh thing? It says, in the winter, the lazy person does not plow, and at harvest time, they seek and find nothing. This is like that classic ant versus the grasshopper fable from Aesop. The ant labors all day long, all night long, and the grasshopper just kind of hops around, right? And then comes winter, the grasshopper has nothing to eat, and the ants all get to huddle in their little anthill and eat because they've been foraging food all winter, right? In the winter, the lazy person does not plow. At the harvest time, they seek and find nothing. Now, if you were living in rabbinic times and you were taught this, listen to what they mean by this. It says, what is the meaning of this? In winter, the lazy person does not plow. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who was not known for being very kind as a rabbi, says this refers to one who has not learned Torah in their youth and desires to learn it in their old age and cannot. And this is the meaning of a harvest time they seek and find nothing. If you remember who Shimon Bar Yochai is, just for a second, he's the guy in the Talmud who he's very angry at the Romans because they've occupied the land, they've destroyed the city, etc. And so he says, this world is terrible. And he goes up into a cave with his son and he learns for a dozen years or so, literally the metaphor anyway is that he buries his whole body up to his neck in sand and then goes and learns Torah for a dozen years. And then he comes out and sees people still living life, still building roads, still running hotels, still having office buildings. And he gets really angry and he goes back in the cave again, buries himself up and learns more Torah. And he comes out and he's like ready to destroy the world until he sees it's Friday afternoon and a man is carrying some bundles of herbs, one in each hand. And the rabbi says, well, what is that for? That's a very strange thing. What is that for? And the man says, well, this one is for Shamor Shabbat and this one is for Zachor Shabbat. And I'm trying to celebrate, so I have double herbs that I smell right before the Sabbath, which is still a custom today, by the way, in Mizrahi Judaism, is to bring herbs on Friday night into the congregation to smell them. And only then was Shimon Bar Yochai kind of settled. He was very picky. So what did he say about a student? He says, if you didn't learn it when you were a kid, you ain't going to learn it when you're an adult. Which means if you didn't put your time in as a kid learning Torah, too bad, you missed out. Right? This is the peak of frustration. This is the top level for the rabbi in this text, to get angry at the student who, I was in the city, you didn't come. I was in your neighborhood, you didn't come. I was in the house next door, you didn't come. I was in the room next door, you didn't come. I'm sitting at the table with you, it didn't come. Well, guess what? You missed the opportunity. You're in the old age and you think that you've lived a good life and now you finally have the time to learn. You ain't going to learn a single thing. You can hear their frustration. But this is why this text is so amazing, right? Can you see the bottom? I'm trying to move it up as best I can. It says, but what Moses said is the greatest of them all. How so? He says, but the word is very close to you. It is in your mouth and in your heart that you may do it. I.e., you need to utter the word from your mouth. What makes Moses the best teacher according to the text? What makes Moses the most powerful teacher according to the text is that he ignores all of the rabbis. He ignores the rabbi that's in the city, the rabbi that's in the neighborhood, the rabbi that's next door, the rabbi that's in the next room, the rabbi that's sitting at the table with you. And he certainly ignores the rabbis that have insulted their own students. It's what makes him the best rabbi of the bunch, right? Because what he says is that you already have it inside of you. I don't have to teach you a single thing. All you have to do is utter a word, and it's already there. And so if we return to our Mishnah and we think about what it takes to open your house, to bring in a scholar, and to learn from them, it's never too late. There's no such thing as a lazy student. There are only bad teachers. And if your student doesn't understand what you're teaching, you need to teach it again and again and again. Especially when it comes to Torah, because it's already inside of you. And that's what Moses was trying to teach on the last day of his life. And that's the lesson that we learn from this midrash about students and teachers. That the love of learning is only outmatched by the love of teaching. And that what makes the Jewish soul so powerful is that we elevate learning and teaching beyond every other value. You cannot have a city that doesn't have a kindergarten teacher. You cannot have a metropolis that's functioning without those who are learning and teaching. That is the special contribution of our culture to world culture, and why we revere our teachers more than anything else, or at least why we should. And on the flip side is also true. Woe be to the teacher that insults their student for sleeping in, for refusing to learn, for fear and embarrassment and depression. Our job as teachers, my job as a rabbi, my job as a teacher is to teach any student who wants to learn. And I'll teach it again and again and again until they think they know it and I think they know it, because it's already in them. It's not over the sea that I have to bring it to them. It's not up in heaven that I have to bring it down for them. It is close, it is in your mouth, and it is in your heart. And so the commandment of the fourth Mishnah of Pirke Avot is to make your house open for these kinds of discussions and to sit at the feet of sages and to learn. But the truth is, the sage's job is to sit with students at their feet and to teach. What Yossi ben Yotzer is trying to tell us is that the commandment for teaching and the commandment for learning are exactly the same. And your job is to learn, but your job is also to teach. And I'm going to leave it there for tonight. Are there questions or comments about the text from the Zoom crowd?
I have a question.
Yes, Marcy.
So I know that Yoez of Sreda was one of a pair of the time, right? The Nasi and the.
Okay, yes.
So was the concept, speaking of teaching and learning, since the next entry is from his counterpart, was the concept that one would take one side of the argument and the other would take the other side of the argument, or did it just happen that way and it was recorded and we have it?
The way the texts are structured, the first 10 Mishnayot are structured generationally. So it's not surprising that when you got to a pair, that one would say one thing and one would say another thing. That's just sort of how the book is edited. But I do want to say that the commandment to teach and the commandment to learn isn't just generationally. It's not like the older generation is supposed to teach the younger generation. It is, when you learn Torah, you are supposed to teach Torah. And when you teach Torah, you're also supposed to learn Torah. There's a series of texts, and I think it's in Masechet Ta'anit, when it's a litany of when all the rabbis die. So-and-so died, and then so-and-so died. And the little stories about them. And one of them, which I'm trying to remember who it was, and maybe someone who's watching on Facebook can type in if they remember. When one of the rabbis died, his study partner was so bereft. And all these students came up to him and said he was such a great man. He should be so lucky to have known him, etc. And no one was comforting to him until a student came up to him and asked him a question about halakha, about Jewish law. And the rabbi said, I'll try to teach. And the student then disagreed with him. And he says, that's what I miss the most. I miss learning and refining my thinking. I think it's in the Midrash, it says that that two learning partners are like a whetstone and a sword, that they actually, when they rub against each other, they sharpen each other. Like two swords scraping against each other, so that mechadadin is the word that they use in Aramaic, which means to both scrape and to sharpen. No one sharpens your thinking more than another mind, and one that you have respect for. And I think that's another part of our culture too. And that's a great lesson in civics, by the way. You can't learn more about yourself than from someone who disagrees with you. Of course, they should be respectful in their disagreement, but disagreement nonetheless. Maybe one more question before we call it a night. Anyone out there on Facebook want to ask a question? I saw Adam Raditsky was watching. Now Rabbi Adam Raditsky. Adam is a member of our congregation, and he was ordained yesterday from the AJR. So we wanted to give him a special mazel tov and congratulations. Anyone else have a question? All right, friends. And then I am going to wish all of you a lovely evening. I hope this was beneficial to you, and that you feel that this class is good. I enjoyed teaching it. We're going to go all the way through the month of June, probably take a break for July, and probably maybe pick it back up again in the fall. I want to wish all of you a pleasant evening, and just to stay home and stay safe and stay healthy, and most importantly, stay loving. Have a great night.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Rabbi.
Thank you.
Lazybones.